Dark Souls 3, the final installment in the Souls series and the direct sequel to Dark Souls 1. At least that's what some of you would like to believe. Similar to the other games, there's a good amount of gear to arm yourself with, and as such, many pieces of equipment I've never played around with. You all seem to like the first video I did about this concept in Dark Souls 1, and plenty of you wanted it done in another game, so here we go. Let's go over the rules quick. The biggest one is that I can only use items in the area they are found in. For example, I can only use this sword in this area because it can only be found here. Another rule is that if I find a consumable in the area, I can replenish it fully elsewhere to introduce some variety to the run. Some other things worth mentioning is that due to the more linear nature of Dark Souls 3, the upgrading of weapons won't be as game-breaking, but I will still be upgrading as much as I can to keep up with the ramping up of difficult boss fights. And lastly, I will value fun and entertainment over arbitrary and mind-numbing challenge, so I will make some calls here and there to maximize the fun I have with the challenge. We will have to make some tough decisions when deciding what each area is, so if I get a point where I have nothing else, I'll try to come up with something unique and fun as a compromise. With all that out of the way, let's begin. We start out with this lovely looking character, and chat decided their name was Dinkomop. Hey, don't ask me, okay? I decided to go with the deprived class for some balanced stats to start out with, but in hindsight, it probably should have been the knight for some extra strength. Either way, we take the fire bombs as our gift and set out for our first boss of the game, Udix Gundyr. As you can imagine that since we start with all of this gear, we can use it for this fight. The fight goes well until phase 2, where I foolishly try to use the fire bombs, and I die because of it in a close one. Attempt 2 and I just do my best PvP impression and spam R1 and it staggers him quickly even in phase 2, so that was a waste. I'd like to say we strip down, but we're kind of already there as we make our way to Firelink, perform the tree skip, die immediately, do it again, and get the covetous Silver Serpent Ring, which increases soul gain. While I technically can't use this outside of this area, I will use it whenever I need to grind for souls to get stat requirements, but that's it. Either way, we make our way to the first official area of the game, the High Wall. For the sake of brevity, I won't go over every single death in the playthrough that occurred due to me running around collecting gear. But just know there was a bunch of runs to items with the knowledge I would be killed. So for items, we have enough to work with. I could have went with this club, but we kind of already used that, so I opted for this deep axe, which was located inside this mimic. I tried promoting friendly fire amongst these enemies, but that really didn't seem to work, so I carefully used the firebombs I had collected in the area and just barely managed to kill it. With all that out of the way, we collect the banner from Emma and make our way to the first boss of this area, Vort. Spoiler alert, I died here. The axe does good damage, but I get frosted quickly in phase 2. But next attempt, I do a better job of dodging this phase 2 truck attack and punish his frost attack, and he goes down easy enough. Onward we go as the demons fly us to the Undead settlement. We start out by meeting with Yul and sending him back to Firelink. We'll definitely need him in a bit. As we make our way to the bonfire and through the settlement, we pick up an Estus shard here, some items there, but nothing spectacular. However, we're able to get into the graveyard and grab some armor, the cleric set, which doesn't look too bad considering it's the first armor we can wear in this run. I then told that there is a great scythe right here, and I gotta say it's really hard to see this ledge right here, and my brightness is fully maxed. Thank you chat for this insight. I couldn't use it yet, but that's okay as we keep running through the area and I find the Caduceus round shield, so that's a nice blast from the past. I also freed Cornix because I didn't know how much I wanted to allow Firelink merchants and spell teachers, but it's nice to have some company back at home. Speaking of, we return and get our level up so we can wield the scythe properly. We then upgrade our weapon and our flask and it's time for this giant tree dude. This fight was being severely frustrating for some reason and I thought the scythe would do more damage, but I was struggling hard. I almost got him first attempt, but I got to death? And the following attempts were even more fruitless as this Resident Evil 4 remake and all the villagers were annoying to deal with. I didn't have a ton of health, so I figured screw it. We'll come back here later. After that frustrating series of events, I went up the elevator and made friends with a giant archer, but didn't deal with Sigurd or any of that nonsense, so it's on to the Road of Sacrifices. We're actually able to find the Brigand set and Twin Daggers. This isn't too bad, and it's nice to get some variety. Oh, this is another area. I mean, I guess it kind of is and isn't, but it's funnier for the script, so let's go for that. Next, we run through this area and gather some times. Well, not many at least, and we begrudgingly pick up the most toxic armor and drop these two jokers to their death. And now we pick up the Exile Greatsword, and while we did pick it up down here near the Fairn Keep, I decided to use it for the Crystal Sage. But first, I thought it would be helpful to run through the keep and extinguish the fires. And after getting a warm embrace from the local Grus, we now get to the reason we came here as quick as possible, the Dream Chaser's Ashes, which means we can now buy an infinite amount of Titanite shards. So now, back at Firelink, we level ourselves up with souls to get the Dex requirement for the Exile Greatsword. And I do upgrade it a little bit. I guess I figured it was time to go for the third and final fire, and after taking the longer and more stressful way around, we make our way to the bonfire right before Abyss Watchers. We'll be back later. Oh, and by the way, I didn't mean to have the armor on, so run invalidated, I suppose. And for some reason, it dawned on me that we got Yol for a reason, so we used him to get the 3 strength we needed to just 2-hand our weapon. We pick up the final item of this area, the Grasscrest Shield, so the stamina regen will be nice for the next boss, the Crystal Sage. Phase 1 goes well enough as we tank the damage rather well, and the damage from our sword is quite good. Phase 2 went smooth as well, as I was able to avoid the clones and track down the real one quickly. Finally, I took a blind shot and guessed correctly for the final hit, and that's a first try, which I was kind of surprised at considering how poorly I had been playing, considering the rust I needed to shake off. But don't worry, I'm sure that's coming. Alright, so let's make our way to the Cathedral of the Deep. And after some teleporting dog stuff, we set up camp and some chatters wanted me to pick up a weapon I can't say I've used before in this area, the Astora Greatsword. We also got this Great Shield, but there was no chance in hell I could use it, but I had it on for some fashion. We needed 2 more levels in Dex, and we just so happened to have 2 free levels from Yol left. So after dying and drawing out our inner strength, we say goodbye to Yol and we upgrade our weapon and get started on this area. After a couple of deaths, we pick up 2 rings, the Lloyd's Sword Ring and the Deep Ring, only one of which is useful, but it's nice to feel like I have something. Oh, and while unlocking shortcuts, this genius decided to take the plunge, so that was funny. While I'm here, I enter the simping bedroom, and yeah, this game lets you respec, so that will be nice in the future. No worries of being severely overleveled like Dark Souls 1. I then decided to grab some I wanted to grab some armor, the Drang armor specifically, and I look pretty good. Drip's not too bad. And we'll certainly need it for this next fight, the Deacons of the Deep. Not because this was hard, but because it was something interesting to do while I slaughtered a bunch of priests. Astora Greatsword was honestly really good. Thank you, Roland, for the suggestion. I would use this on subsequent playthroughs. Alright, so now that leaves us with only one place to go, the Abyss Watchers. And right now, I have nothing. I begin by transforming into a pretty princess, and chat directs me to both the Great Axe up here near the Erdtree avatar, and the Greatsword down in the swamp. The Greatsword requires less strength, so that's what we're going to be rolling with for this next fight. I upgrade the weapon a couple of times and level up so I can properly use it, and it's Artorias time. The sword does decent enough damage and staggers well enough, and I wait for the backup while dodging the gank fight. Let's just say my backup didn't get the memo from time to time. The first attempt ended when the double slam got me. Second attempt and the backup distracts his backup, and phase 2 begins and ends when his fiery stab catches me. A couple of attempts go by, and on the winning run, my backup soloed half of his health on his own, so thank you, buddy. My plan of action for phase 2 was basically just roll and hope to God I could stagger before he got hyper armor. I ran out of Estus halfway through his life bar, but I clutched up and started acting like I've played this game before. Just some patience and he finally goes down. Excellent. The Greatsword is nice, but I'm not the biggest fan of its moveset in this game. Next up, Catacombs of Karthus. This place wasn't the greatest. We start by watching this necroskeleton kill himself with his own ball, which was quite humorous. Chat then let me know that we have practically nothing to work with. That is, except one thing, the Black Blade. It can be found by taking the bridge ladder down to this area with the demon, and the weapon is in the chest with a mimic. So I get the demon to agitate the mimic, and for some reason in the middle of going to fight the demon for waking him, he turns back around and comes right back for me. What the hell, dude? Anyways, we die just as he does, and going back, we get the item and it's time for Wolfnir. Yeah, this boss fight sucks, straight up. It's been a while since I've played this game, so I really forgot just how awful this boss fight is. Like, everything would be fine if his stupid right bracelet wasn't so closely protected to his vape cloud, and he loved cornering me and choking me out. Seriously, screw this absolutely horrid fight. I mean, yeah, it didn't help I wasn't upgrading my weapon, but this was ridiculous. Anyways, we arrive in Irithyll, and that marked the end of the first stream. Starting up the second stream, we get an overexcited puppy, and we make our way through the city. Actually, there isn't a ton of stuff here, but there should be enough to get by. We pick up Yorshka's spear, and I decided it would be a good idea to help Cirrus out and take on Kraton. Unfortunately, I don't have the faith requirement for this weapon, so we do pitiful damage, and after a while I switched to my fist, and while it was better, I was no match for Kraton, either outright killing me or Cirrus, so I went to the bedchamber and realigned my stats. Fun fact, if you close the application as soon as you accept the respec, the game doesn't know you spent one of your uses, which means we can infinitely respec our character, which is nice. We then get back and successfully kill Kraton, and afterwards I go over to this graveyard and we teach our first lesson on gravity in Dark Souls 3 and acquire the Dragon Slayer axe, a good weapon with lightning damage as well. I would have wanted to get the Fire Witch armor and weapon, but I didn't want to spend all stream farming, so chat let me know I could get Kraton's armor set on the bridge where we help Cirrus. Alright, I look good. Didn't exactly want to do a cosplay build, but I didn't have much options, so let's take on the big cheese around here, Sullivan. I struggled a bit since it had been a while, but this wasn't that bad. Eventually, I even was able to parry him with just my fist, and that feels really cool. The main strategy here is to dodge to the left, and in phase 2, if you time it properly, you can take his clone down before he has a chance to do anything. One final hit and we're past this. Dragon Slayer Axe is really good, but I think everyone knows that by now. Definitely less infuriating than Wolfnir. Alright, so now I guess there was some rules that maybe needed some slight bending. As you know, Anor Londo could technically be considered its own area after the elevator ride up. But look, there's some really good armor here in the brass set, and some of you wanted to know where I stood on boss weapons for this run, so I guess I'll clear this up now. I will allow myself to use boss weapons only if there's another boss in the area. Now I could have used the Drang weapons, but that seemed lame, so I went with the... Oh right, we need to go back and kill the tree. By now we have better stats, so we deflower this tree with ease. No sweat. Okay, so now we are going to get the Sword of Judgment. I wanted to use this one since I knew the other ones would be better, so this should be more challenging. Oh, and I made friends with this Aldrich beast. He isn't so bad once you get to know him. Good thing we can fight Aldrich, a boss that is resistant to magic, which is what our weapon excels at. This fight was a bit rough. All of the magic plus arrow spam in phase 2 was ridiculous, and our damage output wasn't really good enough to deal with his scythe attack hitting me, so I went and upgraded it once, and as long as you go for the Gwyndolin, you should have no problems as long as you can out-heal and focus on being patient by avoiding the magic balls. The sword is fine once you actually use the buff it comes installed with, believe it or not. Now it's time to head into the Irithyll dungeon. There really isn't much to say here. It was mostly just running to every point. But we need to fight Yorm, and for this fight I decided to use a special weapon that I think would really introduce it's the Storm Ruler. I mean, yeah, is that lame? I guess, but I really didn't want to fight him with a stupid soldering iron or anything else, so please just let me have this. It didn't matter as I actually died twice to this boss, which was a little bit embarrassing, but hey, I was naked, cut me some slack. After the fight, we get transported to Emma, and we transport ourselves out of this room because we are nowhere near ready to fight the Dancer. Again, this is for those who mentioned the boss weapon, because I am going to use Vort's Soul and get his hammer, one of my favorite weapons in the game. I love this frost effect that exudes from it. I also use this time to farm some armor from the knights, and with no pants, we take on the Dancer. Yeah, this really didn't go well since she hits like a truck, and I can't possibly hope to skill check myself through this fight with an unupgraded weapon, so let's move on for now. At this point there was really only one place I could go, and that was the Demon Ruins. I made my way through collecting everything, and I found the weapon we would definitely be using, the Black Knight Sword. Not the most original, and I would have liked something a bit better, but at least it's not the Fugs. I upgraded the sword and we battle with the old Demon King. Attempt 1 was going well until I realized he was hiding his true power, but attempt 2 was all me as I take him down with relative ease. Do I need to even discuss the Black Knight weapons? Anyways, this was the end of Stream 2, and between streams I did grinding in the off season and got all the Titanite scales I could have access to. Stream 3 begins and we upgrade the hammer as much as we can and we take on the dancer. I guess I'll mention that we got some armor, which is okay, but she still hits like a truck. But with some patience and staying near the dump truck, we can avoid most of her attacks, and the hammer does a great job at taking her health down. Now we can access the rest of the game. I decided to go to the consumed garden first so we could get all the side content out of the way. And we have the shadow set, so that's really cool. It looks really nice, and our weapon for this area is the claw. Yeah, this seems like it's gonna be bad. I upgrade the weapon the best I can and take on Osiris. My first attempt was lousy as my dodges could barely be considered that, and once I got to phase 2, I didn't have enough life juice to outlive his dumb and busted trucking attack with no windup. Attempt 2 went a lot better as we sort of get him into this corner and wail on him and pray he doesn't do that attack, and missing us if he does. The damage from the claw is kinda bad, but it can proc bleed on this fight, which we do several times as we send his child back to the orphanage. I'll take 2 tries. Next up, we have Hot Topic Firelink, and I was almost half tempted to just use the equipment found from Firelink, but we have some options here. Well, in the way of weapons, not armor. First, we have the Black Knight Glaive, which is definitely not a halberd, and I didn't like using another Black Knight weapon, but we have to make do, and eventually I get the Warden Twin Swords as a lucky drop, which I've heard were good, but I opted for the Glaive as it did more damage. After upgrades, we take on the champion, and with no armor, he hits like a truck, so I stick to mostly parrying him. Fun fact, I've actually never parried this boss before now, and I got pretty good at it. Well, that's only half correct. Once phase 2 starts, it's a battle of finding a balance of finding good attacks to punish and not getting comboed to death. I kept the Warden weapon in my offhand, and you can actually parry with it. Not so fun fact, it has 4 less parry frames than your own fist. Doesn't really make sense, so let's move on. This took several attempts, and it wasn't hard, I was just playing poorly, and after enough smackdowns, I have almost screwed it up, but ultimately took the title belt for myself. I figure now was as good as any time to do some light meditation, and while I wasn't appreciative of being whisked away to some foreign land, I guess we'll go ahead while we're here. First up, Ancient Wyvern. What a strange boss. First attempt I get roasted because I wanted the Ring of Steel protection, and attempt 2 was a DNF because after getting to the top, the Wyvern got stuck over here. Has anyone ever seen this happen? Thankfully you can plunge with your fist as we turn into One Punch Man, and now it's time for the area you've all been waiting for. Our weapon for this area is Ornstein's weapon, the Dragon Slayer Spear. Could be worse as we pull the lever and take on the Nameless King. Attempt 1 goes great as this attack hits me somehow, but eventually I'm able to get to phase 2, and I just don't have enough here. My weapon is weak and I can only take at most 2 hits from him. And there isn't any armor here, except 1. So yeah, we went and took on Havel for a bit, and this was awful. Seriously, screw this. These guys harassed me as I climbed this ladder, and I struggled for a while to kill Havel. He drains my health and stamina, which usually leaves me open to a combo, because he can swing for 20 minutes straight apparently. I tried parrying, weapon art, long-range poking, but eventually I settled on backstabs. I could usually get a free backstab off his jumping attack, but I needed to be careful because if he retaliated, I could get comboed to death. Eventually I was able to exploit his AI, as he tried to use the shield buff over and over, and after all that, I learned that you can't even get his armor here, so that was a waste of time. So we just needed to get good at Nameless. And that's what we did. We had an absolutely long and epic fight since my damage isn't the greatest. I get my shots in, he gets his, and after several minutes of stressful fighting, I land this epic attack, and down goes the big man around campus. I realized that Havel was the Piccolo to my Gohan, and that makes Nameless perfect sell. Thank you, Havel. Alright, so next up we've got Lothric Castle. We definitely have some options here. We grab some armor here, which is cool, but heavy, so we only use a couple pieces in conjunction with the prayer set. The drip is sus, but after getting grabbed by a mimic, we grab our primary weapon for this area, the Grand Lance. Can't say I've ever used it, but chat swore by it. I also grabbed the Strength Ring and Sunlight Straight-Sword, but this was pointless as I can't use the weapon art since I don't have the Faith requirement. Either way, it's time for the Dragon Slayer armor. Yes, he hits like an absolute truck and my damage is just okay, but I've always enjoyed this fight and we slowly whittle him down. We have to resort to a cheeky Ember heal, but we managed to close out this fight in one attempt, so I'm happy with that. Finally, the Grand Archives, the penultimate area of the game. We start by grabbing Gotthard's sword and ascending the library. Along the way, we take a swim, open the shortcuts, and lure this idiot to her death. We have a catalyst and access to Soulstream, so that's an option. I also pick up the Avalon, which was my first choice to fight the Spin Doctors with, but this ultimately didn't happen because bolts are expensive, and I didn't have enough since I completely screwed up Greyrat's questline, so I can't get any better ones, so that sucks. End of third stream, and during the break I did some more off-season grinding. First, I took down the Outrider Knight and got his set, and while it is our only armor, it looks good, and it should be enough. Next, I acquire our weapon for this boss, Onikiri and Ubadachi, 2 katanas from this dude. I then went and did a bunch of respecking and also farmed upgrade materials to get it to a comfortable place. Day of the final stream, and I make my way straight to the princes. My favorite fight in the game, and while I played poorly first attempt to shake off the rust, second attempt went much better as the attacks come out fast enough from the katanas, and my dodging was a lot better. If we want to become the final Lord of the Soul series, just go ahead now. I know that was rather short, but trust me, what we have next requires a lot of talking. So as you may know, the final area of the game, the Kiln of the First Flame, has nothing. Like, seriously, nothing. Any gear that could possibly be used here would be after the Soul of Cinder was defeated. This includes both his armor and weapon, and Yuria of Londor's gear. So we have nothing, but I wasn't gonna go full masochist and fight him with just my bare fists. So as a compromise, I decided to mimic the final boss in a rather unique way. I found a photo that gives me a good look at the weapon Cinder cycles through during the fight. For the first phase, I opted for the longsword, since it was basic, and to the Lord of Cinder, a greatsword looks like a regular one. For the Pyro phase, he uses a curved sword, so I opted for the falchion. For the spear phase, I decided to go with the pike. I had to farm this stupid weapon for an hour off those branch dudes in the Crucifixion Woods, so give me some credit here, okay? And finally, for the magic phase, I decided to use the rapier. He doesn't use the staff as a rapier, but it looks close enough, so whatever. I hope this is good enough for all of you out there as I upgrade the weapons to +6 and we finally take on the final boss. This was absolutely brutal. He hits like an absolute tank and I struggled immensely due to that aforementioned rust. Swapping between weapons is kinda mess sometimes, but if I were a better player this wouldn't have taken 2 hours to beat. But I'm not, so it did. I found that it was better to punish the sword and magic phases since they were the least likely for me to get absolutely eviscerated. Spear phase is okay as long as you don't panic, and let me just say this, I hate the stupid Pyro phase. I hate that he uses power within. I hate that he can use the stupid poison cloud you can't punish. And I hate how fast he was with the scimitar. I got a few attempts to phase 2 where he turns into Gwen, and this thrust attack he does hits for way more damage than the rest. The winning attempt was around 10 minutes long, but here's a short snippet of the end. Heal up. It's fine. It's fine. Alright, well, this is it. This is it. We have to nut up or shut up. Probably gonna do a grab. Yep. Gonna do another grab. Let's fucking go. Oh my god. That's fucking over. I was elated to say the least. The challenge is over, and we can rest easy. Yeah, so that was rough at the end, but we powered through it. I liked the run, even if it were more difficult than the first game and took longer. I forgot how brutal this game can be with no armor though, which sucks because I wish I'd have a better variety of equipment that you usually see. I'd recommend you do the challenge though, because it's always fun to use gear you've never given a chance before. I know I didn't really tackle the DLC, but this run was long enough already, so I do apologize, but let me know if you want to see a part 2 to this. I'd be more than happy to do it. Either way, please let me know if you liked the video and how I did, and subscribe if you'd like to see more content from me in the future. I'm Mr. Metagross, Freaking Skull.